effects from a back alley abortion, and the doctor suspects that she's had an illegal abortion, then she can be arrested.
Okay, so, and so do you think it would be better if healthcare provided abortion, like safe abortion? That way we would avoid these
Actual
kind of
problems.
Shady ones and all those dangers that you mentioned.
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely, I believe that with all my heart, because I've seen with my own eyes, and I've met women who have suffered, unspeakably, and I've met service providers, particularly in Latin America, who are very well trained, who receive training, who are doctors, and who are working completely underground to provide women with safe services, because they see women in their communities suffering from these, these back alley services. So the problem is there. It's not going away. Women who are already, particularly poor women, wealthy women, middle-class women, can buy our way out of just about anything. But if you're really poor, and if you already are having difficulty feeding the children that you have, and you are desperate, you will do anything. And so I absolutely believe that those women have just as much right to health and happiness and to, control their own fate as I do. Just because I happen to be born in a wealthy country and can get the services I need, I don't think it's fair that some other woman shouldn't have those same rights.
So, for Planned Parenthood, what do they do exactly, and how do they reach out to the community? What do they stand for?
Yeah, so it's a federation. So it is. There are, I don't know the total number of affiliates right now, but there's about I want to say about 40. So, and they're spread throughout the United States. And what they do is you have sort of a headquarter office that does sort of administration and things like that. And then they position clinics, as many as they can afford to or as need in communities. And they provide everything from, teen pregnancy prevention courses to, helping women who are victims of domestic violence. They provide cancer screenings, breast exams, sort of like, your regular annual exams that you get when you're a woman. And then about 10% of them also provide abortion services. Okay. Don't quote me on that number, but it's either 10%, less than 10% of sort of the organization's income. And it's a not-for-profit organization, but less than 10% of the funds that the organization raises are from abortion services. So it's, so that's the basics. So, and it will depend where they're located. So, for example, the Planned Parenthoods that are in the border area with Mexico, many of them also have midwifery services or safe birthing services, because a lot of women in Mexico who are close to the border will go through amazing lengths to get across the border to have their baby in the United States. So they've had no prenatal care, they're really high-risk pregnancies. So the Planned Parenthoods there are focused on getting these women to safe delivery so that they don't, put themselves and their babies at risk. So there's some variation depending upon what the community needs, but sort of the basic packages, cancer screening, birth control, some safe abortion, but more limited than you might think, and then education. They all do education.
So is Planned Parenthood funded by the government, or?
No, it's a good. So it's kind of a complicated funding mechanism, but they do receive. The one stream of funding they receive is Title X. It's called Title X funding through the Department of Health and Human Services, and that funding is to underwrite contraceptives for low-income women who can't otherwise afford it. So if you were to go into a Planned Parenthood clinic, they have what's called a sliding scale fee, which I know because experienced it when I was in college. And they say, okay, what's your income? What can you afford to pay? And so they only charge you what you can afford to pay, and it's because it's kind of subsidized. But so that only that stream is subsidized by the government.
Okay.
So is it like totally legal for like the government to just shut down a Planned Parenthood like clinic in like any specific area, or is there like restrictions or?
There are restrictions on what kind of abortion services can be provided. Most specifically, like how late into the pregnancy, and that's nationwide. But those restrictions, in terms of like shutting one down, it's more about restricting what services they can provide, and that happens, I think, one of you pointed out earlier, on a state-by-state basis. So, the most interesting cases, I don't mean to be red state, blue state, but if you look at Texas, you'll see the most interesting examples of government machinations to try to defund, Planned Parenthoods. And so they're really focused on cutting off the funding, and then hoping that if you cut off that funding source, then the services will dry up, or if you make it really difficult to get the services.
So is there a lot going on in Texas that concerns abortion?
No.
Whether or not it's like fighting against it, or I know like the Roe versus Wade case, it originated in Texas, right?
I believe so, yeah. I think Texas is just Texas. I mean, they're also, restricting teaching evolution in school.
Uh-huh.
So, and I don't mean to be anti-Texas, but the stuff they come up with related to education and to, all kinds of things is pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay. So I know Planned Parenthood has been around for quite some time, right? Even before the Roe versus Wade case. So did the Roe versus Wade case have much of an impact on Planned Parenthood? Did it like spark more of a
interest
or help support the movement of Planned Parenthood?
I don't know. I think that's a fantastic question because I think that you would probably hear people with two different perspectives. One is that because Roe versus Wade also galvanized the opposition to not just abortion but reproductive health care services, and Planned Parenthood became the lightning rod for that. And so, I mean, we've lost doctors to assassinations and murders, and clinics have been bombed, and so it really became a lightning rod. But then on the other hand, whether it really resulted in a higher profile for the organization, it was really started around the crusade to make birth control legal. And Margaret Sanger was the founder, and this is in, I think, the 1890s. Again, sorry about my terrible history, and she was trying to provide contraceptives to poor women, and she was jailed time and time again, and contraceptives then were made illegal or banned under the U.S. had a law called the Comstock Law, which was an anti-indecency law.
Oh gosh.
So they were equating birth control with indecency, and that's why women couldn't get access to birth control, because it was somehow indecent. I'm not a legal scholar.
That's fine.
Can't figure that one out. But so she started Planned Parenthood, so as part of this movement around just making it legal for women. And at that point, birth control was condoms. So making condoms legal. So
right.
Times have changed.
Yeah.
God.
So, do you think the Roe versus Wade case would have had a different effect if it had come any sooner, any later?
Man, you're asking hard questions. I think that is a question that people have kind of thought about a little bit, because they were looking for an opportunity, and this case, and I think the key point is whether the right to privacy law was the right law to argue. and whether I think the question is, and I don't know really very well what the alternatives would have been, but